The first alien ships landed on Earth with a silent elegance that only the stars could understand. Their presence rippled through the atmosphere the moment they appeared in Earth's skies. No alarms, no sirens, just a quiet realization that something had come from beyond the stars. They hovered above the ground, their shapes smooth like obsidian, shimmering faintly in the sunlight. As they descended to the designated landing zones set by Earth's leaders, military forces were on high alert, but had been ordered to maintain calm. No one knew who the visitors were or what their intentions might be, only that they were here and they were waiting to be approached. On the ground, the people of Earth watched in awe as the ships settled with a strange grace in the open fields of the Nevada desert. Even those who had seen sci-fi movies or read books about alien encounters couldn't prepare themselves for this. The world was captivated. The news stations broadcasting live from all over the globe, the atmosphere thick with anticipation as the first steps were taken into the unknown. The beings who emerged from the ships were nothing like Earth's inhabitants. They stood tall, thin, and with features unlike anything seen before. Their skin was a pale blue hue, their eyes large and black, as if reflecting the mysteries of space itself. Long flowing hair rippled behind them as they moved, and their clothing was like nothing human eyes had seen, shimmering fabrics that shifted in color with every movement. Their presence was serene yet commanding. Their silence spoke volumes. The world held its breath as the leader of the Kirith, the alien race that had come to Earth, stepped forward. Their name was Lorith. They were the one to speak first, telepathically transmitting their thoughts directly into the minds of those gathered in front of them. "We come in peace." The words reverberated through the crowd, as if their minds were suddenly aware of something that transcended language. There was no fear in Lorith's message, only a deep calmness, and the promise of something greater. Humanity was being offered a chance to join the stars. The human representatives standing before them felt a mixture of wonder and skepticism. No one had expected to see this day come so soon. The Kirith's technology was advanced beyond comprehension, and their methods of communication so refined that they felt as though they were speaking directly to the very essence of the soul. It was unlike anything humanity had experienced before. In the days that followed, the Kirith shared their knowledge of the universe with Earth's leaders. They spoke of distant galaxies where entire civilizations had flourished for millennia. They offered humanity the chance to join them, to become part of the greater galactic community. The Kirith promised wisdom, peace, and technology far beyond Earth's understanding. The Kirith did not come with the intentions of conquering Earth, but rather of elevating it. They saw humanity as a species on the cusp of something great, an era of advancement that would rival even their own history. They were convinced that with the right guidance, Earth could be the next great civilization among the stars. Yet, despite the allure of such an offer, there was something in the air, something that no one could put their finger on. Humanity stood at a crossroads, caught between awe and suspicion as they listened to the Kirith speak words of progress and enlightenment. Deep down, they knew they had to tread carefully. The future had just been rewritten, and no one knew how this new chapter would unfold. But one thing was certain: whatever happened next, humanity would not remain the same. It didn't take long for the world to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. Humanity's first contact with an alien race wasn't the peaceful exchange of knowledge and culture it appeared to be at first. While the Kirith continued their message of cooperation and guidance, there was an undercurrent of unease growing among Earth's military leaders, a sense that things weren't as simple as they seemed. For days, the Kirith spent time with human diplomats, sharing their knowledge of advanced medical technology, sustainable energy sources, and solutions to environmental crises. Humanity's leaders were swept up in the promise of a utopian future, and for a brief time, it seemed like Earth had entered a new era. But there were those who remained skeptical. They watched the Kirith from the shadows and kept their questions to themselves. Then came the day when one of the Kirith scouts made a mistake, a small but critical error that would shift the tone of the encounter forever. The scout was young by Kirith standards, eager to learn more about humanity's world and technology, and perhaps a little too curious about the military installations. The humans were so eager to keep hidden from the visitors as the Kirith toured one of Earth's most secure facilities, a sprawling underground complex The scout wandered off the path of their designated tour group, slipping unnoticed through the corridors, their mind overwhelmed by the strange human technology around them. It wasn't long before they stumbled upon something that made them pause. The walls of the facility were lined with strange machines, weapons that seemed almost crude compared to the Kirith's elegant technology, yet somehow more formidable. A soldier at the base noticed the scout lingering near the machines and approached them warily. "What's this?" the Kirith asked the soldier telepathically, their mind flickering with curiosity. The soldier paused before responding, a touch of unease in his voice. "That's a railgun," he said, casually motioning toward the enormous weapon mounted on the wall. The word meant nothing to the Kirith, but the soldier went on to explain. "It's an electromagnetic weapon designed to fire projectiles at extremely high speeds without the use of conventional explosives." The Kirith took a step forward, their senses sharpening. The design of the weapon seemed simple at first glance, but something about it felt dangerous. They had never seen anything like it before. "Want to see it in action?" the soldier asked, clearly amused by the alien's apparent fascination. Before the Kirith could protest, the soldier initiated the firing sequence. The hum of energy built in the room as the massive machine powered up. Within seconds, a bolt of lightning shot from the weapon's barrel. With an ear-splitting crack, the projectile rocketed through the air at a speed that seemed almost impossible for something so large. It struck a target several miles away and detonated in a violent explosion that shook the entire facility. The Kirith staggered back, the shockwaves reverberating through their bodies, their telepathic shields protecting them from the full force, but they were still overwhelmed by the raw power of the weapon they had just witnessed. What was that? They thought to themselves, their minds scrambling to process the information. The soldier's smirk faded as he watched the alien's stunned reaction. "That, my friend, is a railgun. And that's just the start," he said with a cold grin. The Kirith's thoughts raced. They had encountered many advanced weapons during their travels, weapons capable of wiping out entire planets with the flick of a switch, but none of them were as primitive yet potent as this, a weapon based purely on physics and brute force. No energy shields, no manipulation of matter, just raw speed and power. It was only then that the Kirith realized just how much they had underestimated humanity. They had thought Earth to be a backwater planet, a species barely emerging from their Stone Age in the grand scheme of galactic civilization. But this weapon, it was a game changer, something so simple yet so deadly, and it was only the beginning. The scout quickly relayed the information back to the Kirith leadership, and the shockwave of realization hit them harder than any explosion ever. Could humanity had a weapon capable of challenging the might of any civilization in the galaxy, and they hadn't even begun to reveal the full extent of their arsenal. The Kirith were no longer sure they could trust their initial assumptions about Earth. This encounter had only just begun, but already the stakes had changed forever. The Kirith leadership convened in a high-security council chamber aboard their flagship, a sleek vessel that orbited Earth as they continued their diplomatic mission. What had started as an exploration of potential alliance and peaceful coexistence had taken an unexpected and dangerous turn. The revelation of humanity's railguns, followed by the scouts' stunned report, had sparked a frenzy among their ranks. It was no longer just about peace. It was about understanding a species they had grossly miscalculated. How had humans, a race barely out of their primitive state, developed something so rudimentary yet so terrifying? In the days that followed, the Kirith sent a number of their most skilled agents to Earth's military facilities, their advanced telepathic abilities allowing them to subtly infiltrate human minds and gather information. They hoped to learn more about humanity's military capabilities, perhaps understand the depths of their technological innovations, and, if possible, find a way to disarm them before things escalated further. As they dug deeper into Earth's military secrets, the Kirith uncovered even more surprises. The railguns were just one aspect of the terrifying arsenal hidden away in underground bases, deep within mountains and oceans, on military platforms and secret labs. Every piece of human technology they discovered was a puzzle piece of raw, untamed potential. The Kirith's telepathic agents reached into human minds, trying to glean knowledge of weapons that humans had yet to fully deploy, from antimatter bombs to strange propulsion systems capable of reaching the edges of the solar system. There was a particular discovery that left the Kirith shaking their heads in disbelief. A group of human scientists had developed a space-based weapons platform capable of launching devastating strikes from orbit. The humans had combined their rudimentary understanding of physics with sheer creativity, creating a hybrid system of energy manipulation and kinetic weaponry. One of the more advanced platforms was a satellite system that could deploy railgun projectiles from space, traveling at unimaginable speeds, able to strike any target anywhere on Earth. No energy beams, no shields, just raw destructive force delivered from above. The Kirith were shaken. Their species had long relied on energy-based weapons, precision strikes, and telekinetic abilities to disarm foes, but humanity's approach was different, ferocious, unpredictable, and raw. The power of the railguns, combined with the ingenuity of human minds, suddenly made Earth seem less like a peaceful backwater and more like a planet brimming with danger, a ticking time bomb that could ignite at any moment. The Kirith had believed that they were the dominant force in the galaxy, that their telepathic and energy manipulation abilities made them invulnerable to attack. But humanity had created something that didn't rely on finesse. It was brute force and intelligence, a terrifying combination. As the Kirith dug deeper into Earth's military capabilities, they discovered an unsettling truth. Humanity had been preparing for war for centuries. The technology they had been hiding was not the product of a few brilliant minds. It was the result of a long and deliberate process, one that had been building steadily since the earliest days of their industrial revolution. Humanity had learned to harness the forces of nature in ways that few other species could even comprehend. Their weapons, from railguns to space-based lasers, were the fruits of this relentless drive for survival. But even with all of this knowledge, the Kirith were still uncertain about how to proceed. The initial mission had been simple: peace, prosperity, and the sharing of knowledge. Now they found themselves staring at a species they could not quite understand. The raw power of humanity's creations was undeniable, but there was something even more alarming. Humans didn't seem to fear the consequences of wielding such destructive force. It was a mindset that baffled the Kirith. Why would a species that could create such devastation choose not to use it? Despite their unease, the Kirith had to admit one thing: they had underestimated Earth. And as they turned their focus to the growing tension between the factions within their own ranks, those who still wanted peace and those who believed humanity was a threat, it became clear that the stakes had changed. The question was no longer whether humanity could be trusted. It was whether the Kirith could control their own fears of humanity's growing power. And so the Kirith did what they always did when faced with the unknown. They began to prepare for the worst. The Kirith Council had fractured. Once united in their goal to peacefully uplift humanity, the realization of Earth's military capabilities had sparked an internal crisis. While Lorith and others in the diplomatic wing still hoped for a peaceful coexistence, the military faction, led by General Tarek, was beginning to question if peace was even possible. Humanity had proven they were more than capable of defending themselves, and the discovery of Earth's powerful weapons made Tarek see them as a potential threat, one that could outpace the Kirith within a matter of years. Zarek's faction believed that humanity, with its raw, unrefined power, needed to be contained, perhaps even eliminated, before they could grow too dangerous. The Kirith had seen such potential in other species before, species that had quickly evolved beyond their control, and Zarek had no intention of allowing that to happen with humanity. His argument was simple: if they let the humans grow unchecked, they would become the most powerful force in the galaxy and a direct challenge to the Kirith's dominance. Lorith, however, saw things differently. She still believed in humanity's potential for peace and cooperation. She argued that humanity's weapons, while powerful, were a direct result of their need to survive and protect their world. They had created such weaponry not out of malice, but out of the instinct to defend themselves from an unknown and often hostile universe. Lorith and her allies in the diplomatic faction wanted to help humanity harness their power for good, to guide them toward a future of enlightenment. The Kirith's technology, their healing abilities, their energy manipulation, could help humans achieve things they could never dream of on their own. The argument raged in the Kirith's council chambers, with each faction pulling at the threads of the peace agreement. But the question remained, how should they act now that humanity had shown their strength? Carrick's faction, now in control of a significant portion of the Kirith military, decided to take action. Secretly, they began to implement a plan to sabotage humanity's military infrastructure, starting with their railguns. They saw it as the only way to level the playing field and ensure the humans would not become a threat to their greater plans. It began with small, covert attacks, electronic sabotage, subtle distortions in Earth's military systems that rendered critical equipment unusable. But the humans, who had long been aware of the potential for treachery, quickly caught wind of the disturbance. Earth's counterintelligence agencies were quick to respond, and the sabotage efforts were immediately detected. But what the Kirith hadn't anticipated was just how prepared humanity was for such an assault. Earth had long since understood the delicate balance between diplomacy and defense, and while the Kirith worked tirelessly to dismantle the human weapons in secret, humanity had built a network of failsafes that ensured any attempt at disabling their military capabilities would be met with swift retaliation. The sabotage quickly escalated, and before long, it became clear that the Kirith had overplayed their hand. As the first few railguns malfunctioned, a human counterstrike was launched in response, using their own encrypted systems and energy-shielded weapons to neutralize Kirith agents on Earth's soil. In mere hours, a covert war was underway, fought in the shadows, with both sides attempting to outmaneuver the other in a deadly game of cat and mouse. On Earth's side, the military had long suspected the Kirith's true intentions. A group of high-ranking generals had already begun to prepare for the worst, stockpiling weapons and developing countermeasures. They had noticed too many inconsistencies in the Kirith's messages, too many subtle threats veiled behind promises of peace. Humanity had seen this before, races that pretended to come in peace but were merely seeking to subjugate weaker species. Now, as the first shots were fired in the quiet of the desert and the shadows of city streets, it was clear that humanity wasn't going to go down without a fight. The Kirith had underestimated their resolve. Earth's leadership was swift to declare martial law, preparing their citizens for a conflict that they never imagined would come, while quietly mobilizing their military resources to counteract the alien sabotage. Humanity had no intention of letting their most powerful weapons fall into the hands of an alien race. Not again. The world was on the brink of war, and neither side knew how far the other would go. But one thing was certain: the Kirith had learned a painful lesson. Never underestimate a species that has been pushed to the brink of survival. The Kirith had made their move, and humanity responded with a ferocity that took them by surprise. As the covert sabotage efforts escalated, Earth's military had quickly mobilized to not only protect its assets but to strike back. The first wave of retaliatory actions came in the form of electronic warfare, sophisticated counter-hacks that targeted the Kirith's most advanced technologies, scrambling communications, and even infiltrating their own fleet systems. The Kirith had thought they were the ones in control, but humanity's ability to adapt, innovate, and fight back was proving to be more than they had anticipated. Lorith, still hopeful for peace, had tried in vain to stop the escalation. She pleaded with her fellow Kirith leaders, imploring them to reconsider their actions. "We have no right to provoke this world," she said, her voice telepathically resonating with her peers. "Humanity is not what we assumed. They are not a primitive species. They are a force to be reckoned with. If we continue this path, we risk losing everything we've worked for." But her words fell on deaf ears. General Zarek, who had assumed leadership of the Kirith military faction, was determined to proceed with his plan. "They will never be ready for what we can do," he countered, his mind cold with resolve. "They have only just begun to fight, but we've already seen their weaknesses. Humanity will fall in line, just as every species before them has." Meanwhile, the conflict on Earth had spiraled into something much larger than anyone had anticipated. What began as a subtle battle of sabotage and counterattacks soon escalated into open combat. Earth's military, armed with their cutting-edge railguns, now turned their full attention to the Kirith ships in orbit. Space-based weapons platforms activated, and Earth's global defense systems began to light up the skies with laser fire and electromagnetic pulses. The Kirith ships, once pristine and graceful, now found themselves under fire from human technology they had never expected. The sheer magnitude of the destruction stunned the Kirith. Earth's railguns, with their ability to fire projectiles at the speed of light, began punching through the outer shields of their ships. These weren't the elegant energy beams they were accustomed to. These were raw kinetic forces, like ancient, unstoppable forces of nature. At the same time, on Earth's surface, the humans had gone into full wartime mode. Cities that had once been proud symbols of peace were now transformed into fortified hubs, bracing for the full impact of the alien invasion. People took to the streets to defend their homes, even as world leaders scrambled to coordinate military strategies. In secret, underground bunkers across the globe, scientists worked frantically to accelerate the development of new weapons, some based on the Kirith's own technology, others born from humanity's unique ingenuity. The Kirith, realizing that their ships could no longer operate freely in Earth's atmosphere, began deploying ground forces. Massive biomechanical units descended from their vessels, their sleek forms imposing against the backdrop of Earth's harsh landscapes. They moved with terrifying precision, but the human response was immediate. Soldiers armed with experimental railguns took up positions along the perimeter of cities and military bases. As the first wave of Kirith soldiers landed, they were met with a barrage of fire that ripped through their armor and brought down their forces with shocking speed. But the Kirith were not to be underestimated. As humanity held the line, the Kirith began adapting to the new battlefield. Their forces began to deploy advanced shields that could deflect some of the railgun fire, and their soldiers, each equipped with their own telekinetic abilities, became more dangerous, manipulating the terrain to create devastating traps and defensive positions. Still, humanity's resilience shone through. Though the Kirith were technologically superior, humanity had one thing that the aliens had failed to account for: a relentless, dogged determination to survive. Every time the Kirith pushed forward, humanity pushed back harder. It was a battle of will as much as it was a battle of technology, and with every strike, humanity proved that they would not be easily intimidated. In the heat of the battle, Lorith stood in the command center of the Kirith flagship, her mind racing as she observed the destruction unfolding around her. Her peaceful vision for humanity's future seemed to slip further out of reach with each passing moment. She knew that if the war escalated further, Earth's weapons would soon reach levels that the Kirith could not overcome. Desperation was beginning to take root in her thoughts. Perhaps Exaric was right. Perhaps humanity's power was too great, too wild to be trusted. But deep down, she knew that if the Kirith didn't find a way to stop the war, they would face the same fate as so many species before them: extinction at the hands of a race that was simply too stubborn to back down. The war had begun in earnest, and now the fate of Earth and the Kirith rested on the razor's edge. The war had reached its boiling point. Earth's military forces, once hesitant and divided, now fought as one, their combined might pushing the Kirith back at every turn. Humanity's technological ingenuity, bolstered by the devastating power of their railguns, was proving to be a formidable weapon. Yet it was not just the weapons that made humanity dangerous. It was their spirit, their refusal to accept defeat, no matter the odds. The Kirith, for the first time in centuries, found themselves unable to control the battlefield. Their elegant technology, while far more advanced than Earth's in many ways, was no match for humanity's brute force weapons and unyielding willpower. Their ships, once impervious to attack, were now taking heavy damage from Earth's orbital weapons and electromagnetic pulses. Ground battles were no better. Kirith soldiers, trained for precision and control, were being overwhelmed by Earth's relentless guerrilla-style tactics. Lorith, still desperately clinging to the hope of peace, watched in horror as the situation escalated further. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her, whether to continue trying to broker a ceasefire or to align herself with General Zarek's faction and accept that humanity's power could not be contained. But each passing day made it clearer that the Kirith had underestimated humanity's resolve and their ruthlessness. The tipping point came when the Kirith, in an attempt to regain control, launched a full-scale assault on Earth's largest military facility, a sprawling base in the Nevada desert that housed the majority of Earth's railgun platforms and high-tech defense systems. The Kirith's ground forces descended in waves, their biomechanical units crashing into the desert with terrifying force. But humanity was ready. As the Kirith advanced, they were met with the most powerful defense Earth had to offer: massive electromagnetic railguns mounted on towering platforms designed to take down any threat. The first shot fired from one of Earth's orbital railgun satellites shook the ground. A concentrated, high-speed projectile tore through the Kirith's lead formations, creating a shockwave that disintegrated everything in its path. The force of the blast sent ripples across the battlefield, and the Kirith's carefully planned assault was thrown into chaos. But the Kirith retaliated quickly. Their shield systems adapted to counteract some of the railgun fire, but it was not enough. What the Kirith had failed to realize was that humanity's war strategy had evolved beyond simple defense. Earth's military leaders, in the face of overwhelming odds, had begun developing offensive strategies using their own advanced technology, railgun missiles designed to target and penetrate even the strongest Kirith shields. These missiles, capable of traveling at hypersonic speeds, exploded on impact with a force that rivaled any traditional weapon. As the Kirith struggled to hold their ground, they began to deploy their final weapon, a prototype of their most advanced warship, one capable of generating an energy field that could neutralize most human weapons. The Kirith thought it would be the turning point, their last hope to destroy Earth's military presence once and for all. But they had miscalculated again. Unknown to the Kirith, Earth had already anticipated this move. Human engineers, working with a mix of desperation and creativity, had developed a countermeasure, a device that could disrupt the energy field and neutralize the warship's shields. As the massive Kirith vessel entered the battle, ready to unleash its devastating power, humanity's counterstrike was already in place. A pulse generated from deep within Earth's underground military complexes fired directly at the ship, rendering its energy shields useless. The Kirith ship, vulnerable for the first time, became the focus of Earth's combined firepower. Within moments, the ship was reduced to rubble, a smoking husk in the desert sky. The victory was a bitter one, as both sides knew that this battle was far from over. The Kirith had already sustained heavy losses, but humanity had only just begun to realize the true cost of the war they were fighting. As the dust settled, Lorith stood aboard the Kirith flagship, her heart heavy with sorrow. She had known that the war could not continue forever, but now the Kirith were facing the truth they had feared. Humanity had become an unstoppable force. They had been underestimated, and in doing so, the Kirith had failed to prepare for the consequences of provoking them. Lorith's thoughts drifted to the future. If the war continued, there would be no winners. The destruction would be absolute. But if there was any chance for peace now, it had to be seized before it was too late. She was willing to risk everything for that chance, even if it meant defying her own people. And so, with the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance, Lorith made a choice. She would reach out to humanity. She would attempt to broker a final peace, or they would all be doomed to fight until there was nothing left to save. The silence of the battlefield was almost as deafening as the violence that had preceded it. The shattered remnants of the Kirith warship still smoldered in the Nevada desert, while across the world, humanity braced itself for the next wave of conflict. The defeat of the flagship had sent ripples through both the Kirith forces and Earth's military. It was a sign that the tide had turned, but no one could be certain what would come next. Humanity had shown they could defend their home, but the Kirith were not a race to accept defeat easily. What followed next could very well determine the future of both species. Lorith sat alone in a dimly lit chamber aboard the Kirith flagship, her mind heavy with the weight of the choices that lay ahead. She had watched in horror as her people, her allies, had been pushed to the brink of destruction. Her race, once proud and capable of handling any adversary, was now on the verge of collapse, their forces scattered, their fleets in disarray. What had begun as a diplomatic mission had spiraled into an existential crisis, one that threatened not only her people's survival, but the survival of the entire galaxy as they knew it. The truth was undeniable. The Kirith were losing, and the longer the war dragged on, the more catastrophic the consequences would be. Earth's railguns, their orbital platforms, their relentless ingenuity, they had proven themselves time and time again to be more than a match for Kirith power. Humanity had one thing the Kirith lacked: a deep and boundless drive to survive, to fight for their future, no matter the cost. But Lorith still couldn't give up on the idea of peace. She couldn't accept that this would be the end of her people, the end of the Kirith legacy, simply because of a series of miscalculations and misunderstandings. She had to try, even if it meant risking everything. Lorith's decision was made. She reached out to the humans, sending a direct message to Earth's leadership. She offered herself as a representative for peace talks, requesting an audience with the highest-ranking officials. She had no illusions about how difficult this would be. Humanity had seen the brutality of the Kirith forces firsthand, and they had suffered unimaginable losses. Trust, she knew, would be in short supply. As the message was received, Earth's leaders gathered in secret. The revelation of Lorith's offer took them by surprise, as did the sudden realization that the Kirith had lost control of the war. The human leadership, still in shock from their recent victory, found themselves at a crossroads. Many wanted to push forward, to finish what had been started, to secure humanity's position as the dominant power. Others, however, knew that this war had already exacted a heavy toll, and there were those who wanted to stop the destruction before it consumed both sides entirely. Among the human leaders, a voice of reason emerged: General Adira Blackwood, one of the highest-ranking military officials who had led the charge against the Kirith. She understood the temptation of victory, but she also understood the cost of war. We've come this far, but we can't destroy each other entirely. Humanity's future isn't in war, it's in survival and growth. If there's a chance to end this, we must take it. But not everyone agreed. There were factions within the military who saw the Kirith as an existential threat, one that could never be allowed to recover. They feared that if humanity showed weakness now, the Kirith would regroup, learn from their mistakes, and return to finish what they had started. As Lorith waited for a response, she understood the difficulty of what she had asked. Peace with humanity was a gamble. If they refused, if the war escalated further, the Kirith would face certain extinction. But if she could convince them to take a leap of faith, to find common ground despite the bloodshed, there might still be hope for both species. Lorith sat in the silence of her chamber, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. A moment of clarity washed over her. Peace, true peace, could only be achieved if both sides were willing to see the value in each other, to understand that they were not enemies, but two species on the same fragile planet, fighting for the same thing: survival. The response from Earth's leadership came swiftly. They agreed to a ceasefire, albeit a tenuous one, and granted Lorith the opportunity to present her case for peace. The clock was ticking. If this moment passed, if diplomacy failed, the war would continue to rage with no end in sight. Lorith stood, looking out across the stars, knowing that her people's future and the future of Earth now lay in the balance. Would the humans accept her offer, or would the war continue until there was nothing left to save? Only time would tell. The ceasefire was fragile, held together by the thinnest of threads, but it was enough to allow the peace talks to proceed. For the first time since the war had begun, there was a flicker of hope in the air. Earth's leaders, though wary and distrustful, agreed to meet with Lorith. There was a sense of cautious optimism, tempered by the reality that both sides had suffered tremendously. The destruction was widespread, and neither humanity nor the Kirith could afford to continue the war for much longer. Lorith stood before the human delegation, her heart pounding as she prepared to address the leaders of the planet. The room was filled with an array of human faces, scientists, diplomats, military officers, all looking at her with varying degrees of suspicion. General Adira Blackwood, who had become one of humanity's leading figures in the war, sat at the head of the table, her gaze fixed on the Kirith envoy. Lorith, though exhausted from the conflict, stood tall. She had been in countless diplomatic situations before, but never one so fraught with danger, never one where the stakes were so high. If she failed here, it could mean the end of her people. And yet she knew that if humanity refused the offer of peace, the entire galaxy would burn. "I come to you not as a representative of an enemy," Lorith began, her voice steady, "but as a representative of a people who are as desperate for peace as you are. We, the Kirith, have made grave mistakes. We underestimated you, and we failed to understand your strength, not just your weapons, but your resilience, your will to fight for your future. But our mistakes must not be the death of us all." The room was silent. A tense stillness hung in the air. Lorith's words were met with cautious glances, some filled with skepticism, others with a sense of weary acceptance. The humans had lived through the violence, and the scars were fresh. They had seen firsthand what the Kirith were capable of, and many were unwilling to simply let go of their anger. The war had cost them too much. Adira Blackwood spoke first. Her voice was sharp but tempered with the exhaustion of a long, bloody campaign. "The damage has been done, Lorith. We've lost friends, families, entire cities. You want peace, but your people were the ones who started this war. Why should we trust that your promises are worth anything now? How do we know you won't turn on us again, as you did before?" Lorith met her gaze directly, the weight of the question heavy on her shoulders. She had anticipated this moment, the anger, the distrust. But there was no simple answer, only honesty. "You don't have to trust me," she said quietly. "You can't. Trust is something that is earned, not given. But I ask you to trust in what we could build together, something greater than the sum of our differences. I ask you to trust that this war, this destruction, is not the future we must choose. We are on the brink of extinction, both of us. But if we take this opportunity, if we lay down our weapons and learn from each other, we can build something better, something beyond the bloodshed." There was a long pause. The human leaders exchanged looks, weighing Lorith's words. Some seemed to soften, but others remained skeptical. General Blackwood's expression was unreadable. She had seen the devastation wrought by the Kirith, felt the loss of countless soldiers, and understood the human desire for revenge. Yet there was something in Lorith's eyes, a genuine plea, that struck a chord deep within her. Adira spoke again, her voice softer, though still firm. "What would you propose then? A peace that lasts, or one that ends with another war in the making?" Lorith's reply came swiftly. "A peace that requires both sides to change. The Kirith must agree to halt their expansionist agenda. We must work together to rebuild the trust that was shattered. We must share our technologies, our knowledge, not for dominance, but for mutual benefit. Our weapons, our ships, our energies, they could be used for healing, for exploration, for prosperity. If humanity is willing, we can show you how to make that happen." The room was still, the weight of her words hanging in the balance. It was the first time anyone had spoken of cooperation rather than retaliation. But was it enough? Finally, Adira stood, her stance strong but weary. "This will not be easy," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "There are many on our side who will not forgive, who will not forget. But we cannot continue down the path of destruction. For the sake of the future, we are willing to give this a chance. But understand this, Lorith, if the Kirith betray us again, there will be no second chance." Lorith bowed her head, a deep sense of relief washing over her. The humans had agreed, albeit cautiously, but they had agreed. The talks had only just begun, but for the first time in years, Lorith dared to believe that peace was possible. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was a road they would walk together, one step at a time. The war had nearly torn them apart, but it was the hope for a better future that could bring them back together. And for the first time, both the Kirith and humanity had a chance to rebuild from the ashes of destruction. The real work, however, was just beginning.